Join us for our upcoming fundraiser, A Feast for the Senses, at Ardmore Music Hall on September 29th to help HRN expand our table and provide even more resources to the next generation of food storytellers. This is going to be an unforgettable night of flavors, crafted by Best of Philly chefs Randy Rucker and Eli Collins, with sounds curated by Philly-based Spaga featuring Aaron Magner, and conversations inspired by Delicious City Philly host Eli Culp. You can find tickets at heritageradionetwork.org/feast. And if you can't make it to our fundraiser, please consider donating to support our education programs at heritageradionetwork.org/donate.
Westholme is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
It takes us to learn from our past, start working it here in the present, and that's what will create a better, plentiful, thriving future. Knowing that our land rights are protected, our water rights are protected. Now that we're actively farming these lands and using these natural resources, we're building generational wealth for our children to inherit that, not inherit the traumas that were inflicted upon us. That's how we see our future. And that's how we see breaking cycles. And that's how we're able to, again, thrive.
Well, here we are. What a milestone. It's Meat and Three's 200th episode.
Wow, that's a lot of HRN history.
Oh, hey, Addison. Co-hosting this final episode of Season 16 with me today is Meat and Three reporter Addison Austin-Lou. Addison is a chef turned food journalist whose work focuses on the effect colonialism has on food, and just spent the last 6 months with us making wonderful stories for you, dear listeners, with her fellow intern reporters.
Hey there, Taylor. 200 episodes is a big deal. So many brilliant stories have been told. Feels right that we honor this kind of history by looking forward. At the top of the episode, you heard Zach, a Navajo farmer, talking about how he is working to create a future for his kids and community.
Not that it really has to be said, but Indigenous folks have had to fight pretty hard for a future, haven't they?
Yeah, from the moment European colonizers set foot on this continent, it's been a systematic process of destroying native cultures, and food was a huge focus of that cruel effort.
It's pretty wild that we consider a cheeseburger American food when there are so many distinct cuisines that have existed here on this continent for so much longer.
Right? I'm based in the Southwest, and I'm in awe of the ingredients and dishes this region has. It's vital for the future of Indigenous communities to have sovereignty over what they eat. They deserve to be center stage in the global conversations about food.
Well then, let's get into it. I'm Taylor Early.
And I'm Addison Austin-Lou.
And this is Meat and Three on HRN.
Meat and Three.
Meat and Three.
Meat and Three.
One meat, three sides.
Food, news, and storytelling.
A square meal. For your ears.
Meat and Three.
As we've covered in previous Meat and Three episodes this season, food can be weaponized to control people. But what we haven't covered is the fact that diets can be used as a way of creating hierarchy within society, and European colonizers wrote the rule book for it. This might be hard to swallow, but it's a bite we've got to take. Serve it up, Addison.
What do pasta al pomodoro, polenta, shepherd's pie, and chocolate soufflé all have in common? None of these iconic dishes existed in Europe prior to 1492. Tomatoes, corn, potatoes, and cacao are all crops indigenous to the Americas. Can you even imagine Italian food today without tomatoes? These, along with vanilla, chilies, squash, and beans, altered the course of cuisines worldwide, but very few people acknowledge their native roots. Why? Colonialism. European settlers are often credited with discovering these ingredients and utilizing them to their full potential. In fact, 80% of the modern global food market is connected to worldwide indigenous crops. Indigenous cuisines haven't been acknowledged and celebrated on an international stage in the same way as, say, French food. Erasing ingredient origins is one of the many ways settlers used food as a primary tool of colonization. Their control of indigenous foodways led to death by starvation, destruction of ancestral lands and traditions, assimilation, and long-standing health issues. You can't fully understand colonialism without its connection to food. When the Spanish arrived in the New World, one of their primary concerns was their diet. A lot of the food they had brought with them had spoiled or been eaten. They were afraid the colonial body could be altered by ingesting indigenous foods, despite later evidence that these diets were well-balanced and rich in nutrients. In order to stay healthy, the Spanish believed they needed to consume a superior European diet. This included meat from domesticated livestock, wheat, wine, and cheese. They brought over cows, pigs, and chickens and set them loose on indigenous croplands. Fertile soil was also stolen from native families and used to plant grapevines and wheat fields. This devastated staple food systems and forced many indigenous communities to begin eating European food, or starve. They did not take this assault on their livelihoods complacently, though. There are many documented cases of indigenous folks fighting back against these colonial foods. Uprooting fields and killing livestock are only two examples of ferocious resistance, alongside more subtle tactics that had enduring effects. Indigenous women were often brought, very much against their will, to live and work in colonial households. They were civilized in the kitchen by Spanish women, taught to cook meals from the crops and animals that were destroying their food traditions. But often, particularly during times of famine, these women would introduce native foods or cooking techniques to the homes of their colonizers. This refusal to submit fully to colonial force created the blended cuisines you see in the American Southwest today. This region is riddled with the scars of its colonial past. Food insecurity and diet-related disease are rampant among indigenous communities. Many have lost touch with their ancestral foodways. While it is important to acknowledge the devastation brought by colonialism, it's equally important to highlight the continued work being done to combat its effects. Indigenous restaurants, farms, food businesses, and culinary education programs have been established and are continuing the work of revolutionary ancestors. Indigenous food is reaching a global audience. More dietetics research is being done related to native bodies. If we talk about indigenous people and their ancestral foodways in the past tense, as if they are gone, we are only reinforcing the colonial project. Indigenous folks are still here. There is a future for them and their food. The best way to honor this legacy and its continuation is to learn, eat, and support their initiatives. These are the foods that have supported humans on this continent for millennia. Why not try a bite and let them nourish you too?
Wow. Now you've got me curious to try corn in its original cuisine context. I love a bowl of well-cooked grits. No sugar. But let me get some blue or rainbow corn cooked with love. Stat.
Same. I'll make a reservation. We're celebrating 200 episodes after all. If I can eat as a way of supporting indigenous businesses, I'm here for it. But before we share a meal together, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's get down to the root of it all. Indigenous agriculture has so much to teach us and could even provide solutions for worldwide food crises.
Instead of focusing on maximizing crop yield or growing the biggest and baddest fruits and veg, many of the lessons I've learned from indigenous farming and foodways are steeped in cultivating meaningful relationships with the land and each other. On a small farm just outside Shiprock, New Mexico, the devotion of one family sparked a journey that would not only transform their lives, but also the lives around them. Jessica Gingrich shares the story of Bitty Baby Foods, an indigenous-owned baby food company that's nourishing a new generation through ancestral knowledge and traditions.
Imagine awaiting your first child, the dreams you weave for them, and the overwhelming love that fills your heart. As you picture their future, one question arises. What is the best way to nourish this precious life? For Zach and Mary Ben, a couple who were expecting their first child in 2021, the answer wasn't found on supermarket shelves.
We felt that huge need to be able to provide for ourselves, provide for our child who was in the womb still. And, we dedicated that first farming season to our son and what he was going to eat.
Meet Zach, a 6th-generation Navajo farmer and co-founder of Bitty Baby Foods, a company dedicated to preserving cultural heritage, a deep connection to the land, and building a sustainable future for the Navajo Nation.
We could not have, processed and preserved foods as his first taste of, solid foods. And so we took it upon ourselves as parents, as providers, as caretakers, as farmers, to be able to create that first food for him.
The Bens secured a plot of land and began cultivating traditional crops like corn, beans, and squash, using dryland agricultural techniques passed down through generations.
Western farmers are finally realizing that, you need to take care of the land in order for it to take care of you. For us as Indigenous people, we've been working this for a very long time, and I felt like that's something that was taught to me. And so we don't use herbicides, pesticides, and that's all intentional in the way in which that, we are feeding our children these first foods that we are growing.
Their first harvest was a profound moment, providing nourishment for their son and igniting a desire to share these traditional foods with their community.
That whole season was a magical one, of course. And right after that, we took that corn out of the steam pit in our underground earthen ovens and fed him for the first time. That was a confirmation that we need this not only for ourselves and our child, but our community needs this. We need this healing food. Understanding a lot of the health elements related to food on the Navajo reservation.
The Navajo Nation faces unique challenges in accessing healthy food. With vast distances and limited supermarkets, many residents rely on processed foods. Selling at local farmers markets validated Zach and Mary's vision and revealed a deep hunger within the community for what Bitty Baby Foods offers.
It was a huge success. We got a ton of feedback like, we need more of this. We need more access to these types of healthy traditional foods for our children. And so it just created this momentum.
With each step, Zach and Mary saw the greater impact of their work, recognizing the importance of nourishing the whole life cycle. Their dehydrated Navajo white steamed corn cereal became a staple for both babies starting solids and elders who have difficulty chewing. And that's the beauty of Bitty Baby Foods. It's not just about baby food.
There's so much intention. There's so much that is ritualized through that process. When we plant and when we farm these special foods, they're special because, you won't get this in a packaged and preserved food. You won't be able to have that connection to the earth or the sky in this way.
But land access on the Navajo reservation is fraught with historical injustices and bureaucratic hurdles.
So land is a huge issue in itself, especially on the Navajo reservation where we are located on tribal trust lands. These lands were given to us by treaties that were established with the U.S. government during, a lot of the conflict that were happening between the Indigenous people and the U.S. government. We have to go through a special process to get what we would call an agricultural land use permit. And so with that, a lot of these lands sit idle.
Despite these challenges, Zach and Mary secured 6 acres of land that hadn't been cultivated for over 30 years. While their initial focus was on growing food for their family, their vision expanded. They saw the potential to revitalize not just the land, but their community as well.
These are lands that we do have access to, but we need to work it. How do we get our youth to be involved in that? How do we teach our children here and now to be a part of that life cycle of being able to be in touch with the land?
This led to the creation of the Farmer in Residence program, an initiative aimed at empowering the next generation of Navajo farmers and
to establish these youth so that way they can start building generational wealth off of the lands that are undeveloped.
The program's mission goes beyond economic development. It also aims to heal historical trauma, foster a sense of community, and create a sustainable future.
So this is how we're being able to use the past, learn from that, break those cycles, and here in the present, and provide a thriving future for not only ourselves, our children, but the land and the water as well. That way they can take care of each other and have that sense of reciprocity. So that's the key of, a healthy future.
This holistic approach aligns with the legacy of Navajo leaders like Chief Barboncito, who fiercely advocated for future generations' right to land back in 1868.
The U.S. government, they wanted to push us further south of New Mexico and, put our reserve down there. One of the Navajo leaders here, his name is Chief Barboncito. He said, no, that can't happen because nothing grows down there. We have no access to water down there. I will not sign these treaties unless we have access to water here on our own homelands.
Chief Barboncito's determination secured the Navajo Nation's access to vital water sources, ensuring the ability to sustain their agricultural way of life. Zach and Mary are continuing this legacy.
Now our intention is to steward that agrarian lifestyle and live it to its fullest capacity in this modern world, heal through the land. Now we're able to provide that for our future by breaking those historical, generational cycles of trauma. And that's what Chief Barboncito and our ancestors during that time were able to provide for us and fight for us. And now we cannot have it sitting there waiting for us. We got to jump on that opportunity now.
Bitty Baby Foods is not just about growing food. It's about cultivating a future where the Navajo Nation thrives, traditions are honored, and the land is cherished for generations to come.
We'll be right back with more Meat and Three after a brief break.
Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. In Northern Australia, there's a different approach to raising high-quality beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and Northern Territory, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme stewards 16 million acres of rangeland guided by their natural ecosystem. They're led by a belief that if they balance the needs of their cattle with the needs of the environment, both can thrive. Westholme's team of rangeland experts and nature managers use a variety of tools to monitor and respond to the welfare of the environment, like satellites that assess grass health and on-the-ground research. Cattle are happier when they have the freedom to forage and explore, so Westholme ensures that they can roam wild, foraging at will for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives. Their cows graze on native grasses like Mitchell grass, which is only found in Australia, along with dozens of other plants, herbs, and seasonal legumes. The result is a high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia and a flavor suited to complement any cuisine. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Welcome back to Meat and Three.
You've worked in the restaurant industry, right, Taylor?
Oof, sure have. And it is an effort making sure service runs smoothly between FOH and BOH. That's front of house and back of house for folks not familiar. Getting everyone to communicate effectively, quite the task.
Our next story is pretty incredible in the grand scheme of the restaurant world. I have a hard time wrapping my head around the cooperation required to run this particular spot. I can barely keep my front of house manager from arguing with my hotline chef. This kind of group effort really speaks to the strength of Indigenous communities despite the hardships they faced.
Yeah, you gotta hand it to these folks. Restaurants are always a collaborative effort between chefs, owners, designers, staff, family members, investors, and the communities they serve. Some are more collaborative than others, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a space as dedicated to thriving together as the Indian Pueblo Kitchen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. For our next story, Elizabeth Fisher takes us to Albuquerque to learn how a collectively owned and culturally centered restaurant fosters exploration, education, and connection.
At the heart of nearly 80 acres of land owned by the 19 Pueblos of New Mexico, where the former Albuquerque Indian School was once located, sits the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. The center houses museum and gallery space, a library, murals, and native arts, artifacts, and archives. Feeding the center's many visitors is Indian Pueblo Kitchen, an all-day restaurant and teaching kitchen.
My name is Channing Concho, Guatsi Gaitawa I am Laguna and Yakima Pueblo. I am also affiliated with the Hopi tribe from Arizona. I have been here working in the Indian Pueblo Kitchen for going on 17 years now. I've done it all. I've been here through the thick and thin, and I love working here because it's a part of who I am. It's a part of my culture.
From server to supervisor, Channing has an intimate understanding of what it takes to run a restaurant uniquely situated inside of a cultural center and on federal land. On top of navigating the typical challenges of the restaurant industry, Indian Pueblo Kitchen must adapt to the transformations of both the cultural center and all 19 Pueblos. Each of the 19 Pueblo tribes of New Mexico is a sovereign nation. Though collaboration comes with evolving difficulties, it results in a complex, one-of-a-kind menu.
I'd like to describe as a unique Pueblo influence, New Mexico type of menu. We highlight our indigenous ingredients, not just from here in the Southwest, but indigenous ingredients that other tribes may use as well, that have been sustainable for thousands of years. And then we also take the modern day ingredients that were brought through the colonization with the Spanish.
Although most of the 19 pueblos serve the same foods, each has unique cooking techniques, use of ingredients, and certain ways of styling dishes. The menu attempts to showcase their diversity.
So we do try and collaborate with our own people, our own employees, and allow them to share their own family's ingredients and recipes. And then we also try and work with the surrounding pueblos when we are planning events here at the Cultural Center. It's really a shared connection between not just the kitchen, but the entire Indian Public Cultural Center and the 19 pueblos.
The cuisine is not only a cooperative expression for the 19 pueblos. In the restaurant, it becomes a conduit for collaboration and connection for visitors of all cultures.
Cuisine is definitely a shared culture in itself because that's where we spend a lot of our time sharing stories. Now in this modern day, that's usually sometimes the only time we get together is when it's dinner time.
Oftentimes, the stories shared circle back to the menu offerings themselves. Discussing the origin and use of specific ingredients offers customers and those working at the Cultural Center the opportunity to learn, mutually share, and relate.
We have elk and people will say, oh my gosh, you have elk on your menu. I haven't had elk since my uncle used to go hunting for the family. The blue corn atole, it's a porridge. They'll say we have something like this. It's almost like grits, but cream of wheat. And then we start relating to each other. And I think that's very important because we are all related. We call everyone our relations, our people.
Unlike elk and blue corn, other menu items like fried Kool-Aid pickles or the breakfast burrito with Spam feature ingredients that are not historically indigenous, but became staples and comfort foods in the diets of many indigenous people. Learning why these ingredients were introduced provides a lens into a history of colonization and government control, as well as adaptation and survival.
When people come in and they see our menu, they see Spam on the menu and they think, why is there Spam on the menu? This is weird. How is that indigenous? Well, for us, it's not an indigenous ingredient, but it's a comfort food for a lot of Native Americans, as well as other cultures. People have to remember that it wasn't too long ago where us Native people living on the reservation had to depend on commodities and we had to depend on the government to give us food. And a lot of the times, these reservations are rural, out in the middle of nowhere. And so those rations are what are going to keep your livelihood for the next couple weeks or months. You're relating with people from a whole nother side of the country and you're sharing those same stories and you're telling each other how your people survived. They may not realize it until they actually, see it on the menu and realize, we're not all that different at all.
Definitely time to make that reservation. Just looked at their all-day breakfast menu, that native superfood waffle with blue corn, pinyon, and currants. Speak in my language.
Ooh, me too. Okay, but you gotta share.
We'll see.
But honestly, the way their menu tells the story of these communities, their colonial past, and resilience brings so much more depth to each bite. And I am going for seconds.
From farms to restaurants, Indigenous folks are truly making strides into modern food spaces, and we are so lucky to have them here. The future is looking delicious and bright.
It absolutely does, but there's still work to be done. Moving toward the future often requires working within systems that run counter to our beliefs and values. Capitalism and colonialism are deeply intertwined and often go hand in hand with strengthening the status quo. But by making decisions with intention, we can buy, sell, and trade to build an economy that works better for everyone. For our last story, Hannah Chouinard sat down with Ben Jacobs. They discuss how he and his partner use their business as a tool to support Native food systems, agency, and sovereignty to build a brighter future for us all.
I am a member of the Osage Nation of Oklahoma, but I reside in Denver, Colorado, and I am the co-founder of Tokabe, an American Indian eatery, and Tokabe Indigenous Marketplace.
Ben and his partner founded Tokabe in 2008, inspired by the restaurant Ben's family opened 2 decades earlier. Tokabe and their marketplace collaborate with indigenous producers and communities to serve traditional native foods, from fry bread and green chili stew to bison and yonkapin. The space is modern. The walls covered in native-inspired skate decks and speakers blasting hip-hop by indigenous artists. One of Tokabe's goals is to tell the stories of American Indians through food, and in doing so, modernize ideas about who they are and who they can be. But the project has another goal, too. One that builds a future for indigenous food systems.
Our food system was, methodically eradicated. And now we're at a point that we're rebuilding that. And if we can maintain that, then we will only continue to thrive in the future. I believe we have an amazing development ahead. And that's because we have the drive, the power, the determination to do it.
That effort begins at the roots, by sourcing ingredients from native farmers and producers across the U.S., and employing young people from indigenous communities. Tokabe is more than just a restaurant in a market. It's a platform for storytelling and economic empowerment for Native peoples.
It's about building the Native-specific supply chain because we have a philosophy of Native first, local second. For us to be a Native-specific restaurant, we need to make sure that we're supporting Native food production and putting our economic impact back into tribal community.
Ben is optimistic about the future, for Tokabe and for Indigenous people as a whole. Their resilience and spirit in the face of systematic violence, he believes, should be an inspiration to carry us all forward.
Right? It's like, if you always look that the future is dark, our people would never even be here. But they have made it through far darker things than I ever have. The future is always bright. If our communities can make it through forced relocation and eradicated food systems and, being hunted down and chased and killed off. And that's why I think it's you will always overcome. And as a community, we will overcome. So I have nothing but positivity in what can be created.
Tokabe's focus on strengthening Native communities does not serve only itself. Building up Native food systems builds a more resilient future for everyone.
But from the food side, I always want people to understand is we are a distinctly American food system. That's the thing is it's not just for Native peoples. It's not just for Indigenous people. This is for all of us.
Wow. I am so stoked to see the future of Indigenous food gaining momentum and recognition, and frankly, celebration. There's so much we can all learn about nourishing our bodies, souls, and the planet by supporting these efforts. Speaking of future, I hear you've got something pretty exciting coming up in your future.
Yeah, it feels pretty surreal. Myself and another incredible intern, Jessica Gingrich, have officially been greenlit for our own podcast on HRN. It's called Folklore. We'll be taking a deep dive into food culture and history with immersive field reporting, thought-provoking culinary connections, and quirky conversations. Jess and I can get pretty silly. I swear that woman is the other half of my brain. So stay tuned. We can't wait to share it with you all.
And I can't wait to hear it on air. And that, folks, is our 200th show and a wrap on season 16. Thank you for listening. Big, meaty love to all of our reporters from this spring 2024 cohort. H and I will miss you so much. Learn more about the guests and topics we touched on this week by checking out our show notes.
This episode was reported by Hannah Chouinard, Jessica Gingrich, Elizabeth Fisher, and me, Addison Austin-Lou.
Addison also lead produced this episode with support from Sophia Hooper and Sam Gerardi. Meat and Three is produced by H. Conley and me, Taylor Early. Our audio engineer for this episode was Armin Spengen. And a little shout out to the one and only Armin. Thank you for blessing us and Meat and Three with your unbelievable engineering talent for all this time. We love you, Armin. Our theme song was composed by Breakmaster Cylinder. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Meat and Three is powered by Simplecast. Meat and Three is a production of Heritage Radio Network, the world's pioneer food radio station. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org and follow us at heritage_radio. And please stay in touch. Whether you have a story idea or would just like to say hey, write us at ideas@meatin3.nyc, and that's all spelled out. And we'll see you for season 17.